In 2018, I remember walking out onto the field to play footy for my local club. I started that match, but I never finished it. And I've never finished any other match since. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened. All I know is that midway through the second quarter, I ended up walking off the field with a heavy concussion and sitting on the bench wondering what was next. Hey everyone, I'm Zach Latham, and today I'm here to tell you about what a second brain is, why I think you should have one, and what benefits it has had for me. Stick around to the end and I'll tell you a little bit more about my concussion and all the symptoms I ended up having after it. Today we're going to talk about three things. One, what is a second brain and why do you need it? Two, what forms can a second brain be in? And three, how do you start building one yourself? Let's start with what is a second brain? All of you would probably do this in some way or another, whether it's using a notes app on your phone, whether it's using audio notes to record yourself, or if it's documenting things from articles you've read or books you've read or anything like that. You all probably have a way of storing notes in some way that works for you. The term second brain was only coined recently. For a long time before that, it was known as personal knowledge management. The idea is that you're storing information somewhere and having a system that then makes it so that you can find that information again when you need it. That's one of the biggest problems with our digital assets. We don't have a way to sort them often, and they can be in so many different places. So how do you find them? And how do you make sure that when you need it, you can go and surface it straight away? So why do you need a second brain anyway? Could be partly because you don't have a system of storing all of your information that you learn every day. There's numbers on the internet that talk about how much your brain is taking in every day in terms of like gigabytes or terabytes, and it's heaps. How is our brain meant to be able to keep all of that? I don't know about you, but I'm forgetting things all the time that I've learned. I listen to a lot of podcasts, I watch a lot of YouTube, I read a lot of books, and I end up losing this information that I've spent so much time focusing on. If you had a chance to optimize this and make it so that you could store this information in a better way and in a way that you could find again in the future when you need it, wouldn't you take it? I would. The other reason why you should have a second brain is because our brains aren't really made for storing information. If you think about what we would have been like even just 300 years ago, the things we had to remember was much more minimal. We didn't have this hustle and bustle of life where we had to remember this, this, and this. We're just remembering the things that we have to do in our daily lives, and that was about it. So our brains haven't developed at the rate that technology has developed. In fact, I would say in some cases, our brains are probably going backwards because now we're not memorizing things like we used to. Because we don't need to. We can Google something instead of having it there stored in our brain. That's just one little example of why we need something to store this information. The other reason is because our brains are made to be creative. That's the whole point of why we're human, right? We are creative beings. We're people who can have all of these great ideas and then we can action those ideas. I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like my brain is so clogged up with information trying to remember what I have to do the next day that I don't have the creative power to then think about new things and generate new things. Your brain can definitely store information. I'm not saying it can't, but it's not what it's primarily made for. Our brains are wired to be really creative, and then we also can store information that we really need. But as I said, don't use your precious mind, the one that you have cultivated all these years in learning all of these new things and is wired so perfectly, to just use it to then store information. Outsource that. We can give that to something else to do that. Instead, use your brain to be creative and come up with these awesome solutions to problems that we have in the world. So what does a second brain look like? It's obviously not like I have a brain in a vat that I have somewhere in my room that I just go and plug myself into sometimes. Well, I guess it's kind of like that actually, because I guess I'm like basically going to my computer and that's where all my stuff is. Or I've got the extension of myself, my phone, sitting in my pocket at all times that I can pull out and download information from it basically. Maybe one day somebody should make a computer that looks like a brain. That'd be trippy as. But really, a second brain is just a way to store information. It has to be a system. It's not just putting something somewhere and then saying that that's a second brain. Instead, we want to have a system around it. And part of that system is having notes, reminders, calendar events. Do you remember when you were in school, let's say, and you put your hand up to ask a question to the teacher, but then the teacher didn't get to you straight away? And then you sat there awkwardly with your hand in the air, just waiting for the teacher to call on you. And then finally the teacher says your name and you go, I can't remember what I was going to say. I don't know about you, but that happened to me a bunch in school, and it's happened to me heaps since as well. I find that there's times when there was something that I really wanted to remember. Like somebody told me to go and do something and I was like, yeah, I'll go and do that. And then I forgot completely what it was. Your second brain should also be a very centralized system that has all of your information in it. And whether or not it is all, you're putting it all into that one place, or you're drawing it from all of those places and it comes into one place, that's even better, because now you've got the benefits of all the different apps that you might be using, but it's all coming back into one place. So where does the term second brain even come from? Well, it comes from this book by Tiago Forte called Building a Second Brain. And he goes through and talks about what does it mean to have a second brain, and then also how do you build one yourself? What are the right apps to use, for instance? So what's the point in a second brain? How can it actually help you? A little example on how this can be really helpful. I was just thinking about putting together some YouTube videos again. And when I was trying to think about some ideas, I went to my second brain. I was able to find so much more. I've got a list of about 50 ideas that I could go through and do videos about. And it's not because I've written things up already. It's because I've had all this information over time. As I consume things, I take notes on it. Or I take a snippet from an audio podcast and get it transcribed. Or when I read an ebook, I highlight it, automatically sends it into my second brain. Whatever it is, all this information that I consume has all gone into my second brain. So then now when I want to start writing something, or I want to start writing a video in this case, I've got it all there ready to go. I just pull it all together and then I just need to put my own thoughts to it. Some of it already is my thoughts because I've been journaling as well, and that's part of that too. That's one massive benefit to this. You're never starting from scratch. You never have writer's block because you've got all your ideas there that you've been building on for years. I've had a second brain going for probably 3 or 4 years now. There's a guy called David Perel, and he does a really good job of distilling information that he's learnt and putting it into articles, into tweets, whatever it is. David Perel took a course by Tiago Forte about building a second brain, and it changed the way that he did things as an online writer. Part of that was because he didn't need to start from scratch anymore. He now had all of this work behind him ready to go, and it's the best of the best as well. Because no longer are you having to go through a book or go look on Google and see if you can find some information. Who knows what sort of information you find on Google? But you need to have a place that you can go to that you know, I'm gonna find what I think is the best content that I've consumed in my life. How else could this be useful to your life? If you're not a content creator, that's fine. There's so many other things that this could be helpful for. It means that you can be way more effective in your work, in your leisure, whatever it is that you want to take notes on. For example, I'm not much of a golf player, but I went to go play golf one time with a friend of mine. We went down to the driving range. I have no idea how to really swing a golf club. You know, I've done it a little bit in the past, but it's certainly not a skill of mine. And he was a lot more skilled than I was. So as I was having a few swings and getting them going, I was asking him, you know, what's my form look like? What help do I need? Can you give me some tips on how I can do a little bit better? I feel like every time I hit it keeps going off to the right. I don't really know why. And then he gave me some different tips and I tried it, and every time I was getting better and better, as you do when it's a new skill, right? I wrote down all of those notes as I was going. I was just typing them into my notes app on my phone. It meant that now when I go back to the driving range, I've got those notes there ready to go that I can use to improve my golf swing again in the future, which is crazy. He gave me a tip, you know, a year and a half ago, and now I'm able to use that again in my daily life without having to store it in my brain the whole time. If off the top of my head, I have no idea what he told me as tips. Probably keep your back straight, I don't know. But I've got it all written down so I could find it and be able to tell you exactly what it is that he thinks that I need to work on. That's the sort of value that this sort of thing brings. There's also so many other use cases for this. Even things like your password management. You might already use some sort of system where you've got all your passwords saved so you don't have to remember them all. Imagine having to remember every single one of your passwords that were all different. There's no way that our brain can remember that, and nor do we have to. Why should we remember those things? Instead, if you remember how to access those things, that's all you need. But if you're doing it online, there's plenty of ways that you can do it. There's so many apps. You're probably already using a bunch. There's things like the stock apps on your phone, whether it be notes, reminders, messaging apps. It might even be like Word documents or Google Drives. For me, the one I use is called Notion. Notion is a tool that you can bring all sorts of information into it. I'll go through and give a tutorial on how to use Notion at some point. Probably the most vital part of my second brain is an app called Readwise. Readwise is amazing. This isn't sponsored by them in any way. If you're doing any sort of work online and you need to store information, or you're listening to podcasts, or you're reading ebooks, or you're saving tweets, for instance, can all be put into Readwise. And then Readwise basically puts it all into one system, and then you can export it wherever you want. So I get mine exported to Notion, as I said. It's a really valuable resource. If you're not using it already, I would definitely look into it. It's pretty cheap. I think it only costs $5 a month, something like that. It's not too expensive. I'll leave a link below to go and find Readwise. If you want to click on my link, you can. It will support me. It also gives you a couple extra months for free as well. So go and check it out. It's a really good product. I really would recommend that. So how can you get started creating your own? Well, the way that I got started was I just started documenting more of what I was thinking throughout the day. Just super simple things. Like if I had an idea, I just wrote it down in an app that I was using. And then you can always move that data later once it's written down. So I would write things into my notes app, use whatever's comfortable to you. Write down just some of the ideas you're having. You could even just start journaling about how your day went, even if it's just your work life. If you're not a writer, do some audio recording. It's not hard. Just go into your voice memos on your phone, click record, and then just talk about whatever you want to talk about. There's so much software out there now that can turn that audio into a transcription. Back to the concussion story. As you can tell, obviously I've recovered pretty well. My brain is functioning fairly well. There's still things that I noticed that is different with me, I think. My memory is certainly not the same as it once was. Immediately after, I had quite heavy symptoms. The doctor originally told me I wasn't going to be able to play footy or any sport for I think it was 4 weeks, which is a pretty big amount of time for a concussion. Some of the symptoms I had was I had some blurred vision. I had a huge sensitivity to light and sound. And at the time I was teaching very, very young kids, like 5-year-old kids. And I tell you what, sensitivity to sound is not something that you want when you're teaching kids like that. The symptom that was probably the most difficult for me to deal with was my ability to talk. It completely went downhill for about 6 months. And that's because I would just be talking and I'd forget a word that is just so easy to remember. Like a word like keyboard. I just couldn't remember what it was in that moment, and it drove me insane. I've always prided myself on my ability to speak, whether it be in front of people or just one-on-one in conversation. I've always thought that I've been able to speak pretty well, but then in that moment, it was the worst. I hated having conversations with people because all I could think about was worrying if I was gonna forget a word that was so basic. So is a second brain a cure for a concussion? No, obviously it's not. But it does help you manage the symptoms that you can have from things like concussions. But I think that it can help anybody in any walk of life. If you have any questions about this topic and you want to know more, leave a comment down below or reach out to me via DM and we can talk a little bit more about it. I'm more than happy to make follow-up videos about this as well. If you look in the description box as well, I'll make sure that I leave some more information, whether it be different books that you could read or different articles you could go and check out. I want to really get this information out there as easily as possible so that you can just go through it and have a look at it yourself. I'm also more than happy to build you templates for things like Notion or whatever it is that if you want to be able to store this information in a way and you just don't know how to bring it all together, reach out. I'm more than happy to help. Really appreciate you watching this video. Thanks so much for sticking to the end. If you want to hit subscribe and like, that'd be super helpful. Yeah, I just had to change it up there. You know, everyone says like and subscribe. Subscribe and like, that's the way to go. And we'll catch you in the next one, all right? See ya.